Hello and welcome to My Karate, My Life. I'm Chrissy Howard. This podcast is a space for stories, lessons and reflections from a lifetime of karate. I've spent over 4 decades training, teaching and learning, not just how to move but how to grow. And through that time I've come to realise that karate is never just about technique, it's about who you become along the way. In this podcast I'll be sharing personal stories from my journey, the challenges, the doubts, the lessons that have stayed with me and the moments that shaped not only my karate but my life. We'll talk about confidence, about fear, about resilience and about what it really means to keep going even when things feel difficult. Some episodes will be quiet reflections, some will be lessons from the dojo and some will be conversations with others walking their own martial path. This isn't about being the best, it's about showing up, learning and continuing, no matter where you are on your journey. Whether you've trained for years or you've never stepped into a dojo, I hope something here speaks to you. So thank you for being here and I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Hi everyone, welcome back to the My Karate, My Life podcast. This is episode 20. I'm Chrissy Howard and today I want to talk about something that, if I'm honest, I think affects far more karateka than perhaps we like to admit. I will of course include myself in this so as not to mislead you. So here's the thing. You can be a black belt, you can have trained for decades, you can compete, you can win, you can teach. You can be the person standing at the front of the dojo telling everybody else to believe in themselves. And still sometimes wonder, am I good enough? So this got me thinking, why? Why when we're motivated, when we're dedicated, when we're putting in the work, can we still feel like we're not enough? Surely, if we're doing the work, we're doing pretty much everything we can do. And perhaps that's where this episode begins. Doing the work. I think there's something really important about effort. If you're motivated, you're dedicated, and you're consistently putting in the work, then you're giving yourself the best possible opportunity to improve. I also think this is where elements of confidence can come from. If we feel prepared as we can be, having given our heart and soul to something, that something in this case is karate, that should be enough, right? That of course doesn't mean you're guaranteed to succeed. Karate doesn't work like that. You can train incredibly hard and still lose a competition. You can practice the kick, a single kick for months, and still not get the height you want or the delivery that you're anticipating. You can prepare for a grading and have a terrible day. But that doesn't mean that the work was wasted, because something is happening underneath all of it. You're adapting, you're learning, you're becoming more capable. Psychology would call this self-efficacy. It's essentially our belief that we can influence our ability through our actions and effort. And one of the most powerful ways we develop that belief is through actually experiencing ourselves getting better. That's something I see all of the time in karate. A student comes into the dojo and they can't do something. 6 months later, they're doing it without even thinking about it. Maybe their front stance is stronger, possibly more connected, maybe their balance is better, maybe their kata has become more fluid. Maybe they're finally able to kick without losing balance. Maybe they walked into their very first grading terrified, but now they walk into the dojo as if they've always belonged there. That's success. So success is not necessarily the belt that we wear, the certificate we've earned, the medal, the change, the adaptation. It's the person you've become through the process. So this brings me on to something I've been thinking about a lot. We understand the importance of feeding our bodies properly. If I want my body to become stronger, I need to give it the right nutrients. I need to train it, I need to rest it, I need to look after it. If I'm growing something in my garden, I don't just throw a seed into the ground and forget about it. I nurture it, I water it, I give it as much light as it can have without other plants crowding it. I protect it. I create the conditions for it to grow. So why wouldn't I treat my mind in a similar way? Why wouldn't you treat your mind in a similar way? What are we feeding it? What are we allowing into it? What are we repeatedly telling ourselves? And perhaps most importantly, what are we choosing to focus on? There's a popular Buddha quote attributed to this, and it was something like, what we think we become. I think the exact attribution is questionable, but the underlying idea is fascinating, because we now know that our brains aren't simply passive recording devices. Our attention is selective. We notice things that we have learned to look for. Our repeated thoughts and behaviours can become patterns. So if I'm constantly telling myself I am not good enough, I'm too old, I'm not as good as her or him, I'll never be able to do that, perhaps I'm even saying I'm not a real karateka and I'm not successful, then perhaps I shouldn't be surprised when those thoughts start to influence the way I behave. Trust me, I have been there. And when you are there, there is nothing anyone can say to you to convince you otherwise. Historically, I've had some really nice compliments from some very senior instructor, but I hadn't been in the right place to hear them. I think this is where we have to be careful with the idea of positive thinking and manifestation. Nearly didn't say it. Manifestation. I'm not suggesting that we can simply think something into existence. I don't believe that if I sit in my living room and imagine myself becoming a world champion, the universe is going to deliver me a trophy. That, of course, is not how it works. But I do believe that our thoughts can influence our behaviour. Our expectations can influence our actions. Our beliefs about ourselves can influence whether we attempt something, whether we persevere, and sometimes whether we give up. That matters. So be careful what you say to yourself. Bruce Lee spoke a lot about the relationship between the mind and the body, and there's an idea attributed to him about not even joking about the negative things concerning ourselves. Whether we use his exact words or not, I think the principle is worth considering. Because imagine I was coaching a child. Every time they made a mistake, I said, "That's rubbish, you're useless. You'll never be good at this. Why can't you be more like them?" We would quite rightly say that I am a terrible coach. So why do we think it's acceptable to talk to ourselves like that? Why is it okay for us to become our own worst instructor? We wouldn't speak to another human being in that way, I would hope. So perhaps we need to become better coaches of ourselves. That doesn't mean pretending everything is wonderful. It doesn't mean ignoring our weaknesses. Quite the opposite. Karate teaches us to identify what needs improving. But there's a difference between saying this needs work and saying I'm rubbish at this. One is an observation, the other is an identity, and they are not the same thing. Then we come to something that I think causes an enormous amount of insecurity. Comparison. We compare ourselves to others constantly. They are faster than me. They kick higher. Their kata is better. They're stronger. They're younger. They're fitter. They've won more competitions. They have more students. They're more successful. They're more confident. Interestingly, prior to someone coming to train a one-to-one class with me, I ask a number of questions of them. One of them is, if you could steal one ability from another karateka, what would that be? Then I might explore that again on the day of the lesson. And the obvious question, genetics aside of course, would be, what can't you do already? Or why can't you do that already? Or perhaps more importantly, why do you think you can't do that? What might be preventing you from achieving that? Is it genuinely a physical limitation? Is it a lack of practice? Is it fear? Or is it lack of confidence? Or have you simply decided somewhere along the line that you can't? Social media hasn't exactly helped us with this. Has it? Let's face it. Has it really helped us with regards to comparing ourselves to others? Because we're constantly presented with somebody else's highlight reel. One of the reasons I enjoy posting so much is because I know I am not perfect. I know I'm not as physically attractive as some other people. I am average. My karate is average. There are outliers, people that are fantastic at everything. Annoyingly so sometimes. But the majority of us are average. And I mean that in a very kind way. We are the many, not the few. There is nothing about me that the average person could not be. And I think we should see more of the average, because perhaps the average is actually much more interesting. The person who is aging, the person who struggles with their weight, the person who isn't naturally flexible, the person who doesn't have perfect technique, the person who is frightened, the person who is learning, and the person who is just normal. But here's the thing. What's the point? What do I actually gain from comparing myself to somebody else? I cannot become them. I can be inspired by them. I can learn from them. I can even admire them. I can seek to follow their example, but I cannot become them. And nor should I want to, because there is only one me, and there is only one you. That's one of the things I love about Budo. The journey is personal. We're all travelling in roughly the same direction, perhaps, but we're not walking the same path. We have different bodies, different experiences, different histories, different strengths, different weaknesses, different reasons for being in the dojo. So perhaps the better question isn't, am I as good as them? Perhaps it's, am I better than I was? Because we don't see the whole picture. There's another thing about comparison that I think we forget. We often compare our behind the scenes with somebody else's finished product. We see somebody who is incredibly good at something, but we don't see the thousands of hours they've put into it. We see the black belt, we don't see the white belt. We see the competition medal, we don't see the competitions they lost. We see the confident instructor, we don't see the moments they may have questioned themselves. We see the finished tree, we don't see the seed. And perhaps that's worth remembering. The people we aspire to be like are probably not fundamentally different from us. They've simply put in the work. And many of them are still putting in the work to maintain what they've achieved already. And if I can divert back to my own dojo briefly, the work is where you will capture my attention. The willingness to show up, even when you don't feel like it. I won't reward you without it. And this comes from personal experience. I have never in my life received anything for free. It has come from effort and consistency. That's what I expect and want from my own students, because I know what effort can do. I've experienced it myself. And that's another thing we sometimes forget. There is no finish line. Let's get back on track. You don't arrive at some magical point where you've become good enough and never have to work again. Karate doesn't work like that. Budo doesn't work like that. And life most certainly does not work like that. So what is success? What actually is success? How do we measure it? Is success winning? Is it becoming a world champion? Is it getting a black belt? Is it having a successful dojo? Is it having thousands of followers? Is it being recognised? Or could success be something much quieter? Something that nobody else even notices? Something you could not do 6 months ago, and now it feels like second nature? I think that's success. Maybe success is walking into the dojo when you really don't feel like going. Maybe it's finally overcoming a fear. Maybe it's being able to perform a kata that once seemed impossible. Maybe it's becoming a better teacher. Maybe it's having the confidence to help somebody else. Or it could even be simply being a little kinder to yourself, more so than you were yesterday. And perhaps we overlook those things because we're looking for something bigger. We're looking sideways. We're looking at somebody else's achievements. We're waiting for something external to tell us, yes, you are successful now. But perhaps we don't need that permission. So what holds us back from truly fulfilling ourselves? I don't think there's one answer, because sometimes it's fear, insecurity, comparison, maybe even perfectionism. But perfectionism is an interesting one. Brené Brown, if you don't know her, look her up. She talks about the difference between perfectionism and healthy striving, because they're not actually the same thing. Wanting to do something well isn't necessarily perfectionism. Wanting to improve is not perfectionism. Wanting to become the best version of ourselves, the best version we can, that isn't perfectionism either. Perfectionism is different. It's often rooted in the idea that somehow, if we can just get everything right, if we can perform perfectly, if we can look perfect, then perhaps we can avoid criticism. Perhaps we can avoid judgment. Perhaps we can avoid feeling like we're not good enough. And I think that's really interesting when we bring it back to karate, because there's a huge difference between I want to improve this and I have to be perfect at this. One is growth. The other, well, that can become a trap. Because if we're constantly waiting until we're perfect, if we're constantly waiting before we're perfect, before we allow ourselves to feel good enough, then we're never going to arrive. There's always going to be something else, another grade, another competition, another person who is faster, stronger, more flexible, more experienced. That's one of the things that can feed insecurity. We're constantly moving the finish line. Sometimes we're waiting until we're good enough before we allow ourselves to move forward. I expect nearly every instructor in the world has heard someone say, I'll join when I'm fit enough. But that's the point, isn't it? You don't get fit enough and then start karate. You start karate and karate helps you become fitter. You don't become confident and then walk into the dojo. You walk into the dojo and confidence can grow because you were brave enough to walk through the door. We can spend an awful lot of time waiting to become the person we think we need to be before we actually begin. I waited way too long. We need to stop waiting. Perhaps that's one of the greatest challenges of karate. We're constantly being asked to step outside of our comfort zone, to attempt something we cannot yet do, to fail. There's another thing I think Brené Brown's work can teach us. If we're going to be brave enough to put ourselves out there, then we have to accept that sometimes we're going to fall. If we're brave enough to compete, we might sometimes lose. If we're brave enough to grade, we might not always pass. If we're brave enough to teach, we might sometimes get something wrong. If we're brave enough to start something new, we might discover that we're not very good at it yet. But that shouldn't deter us, because falling isn't the opposite of courage. Sometimes falling is evidence that we were brave enough to try. And I think that's an important lesson for Karateka. Because if we're so frightened of failing that we never attempt anything difficult, then we're not really protecting ourselves. We are limiting ourselves. And I'd rather fall while moving forward than stand still because I'm frightened of falling. To try again, to fail again, to keep going, and eventually we change. That's Shugyo. That's the practice. Not simply becoming technically better at karate, but using the practice of karate to become better at ourselves. And perhaps confidence isn't what we think it is. I've started to wonder whether confidence is actually the absence of insecurity. Maybe it isn't. Maybe confidence is being insecure and doing it anyway. Maybe it's feeling nervous before the grading and stepping onto the floor anyway. Maybe it's wondering whether you're good enough to teach something and preparing yourself properly anyway. Maybe it's walking into a competition knowing you might lose and competing anyway. Maybe it's looking at someone who is better than you and choosing to be inspired rather than diminished. Perhaps that's confidence. Not, I know I'm the best, but I know I'm still learning and I'm okay with that. That's a very different kind of confidence and perhaps a much more sustainable one. I often go back to my garden analogies because I think there's something really beautiful about it. We wouldn't plant a seed and then dig it up every morning just to check to see if it's growing. We wouldn't shout at it because it's not growing quickly enough. We wouldn't compare it to the plant next door. We would nurture it. We would give it what it needs. We would allow it time, and eventually it grows. Perhaps we need to do the same with ourselves. Nurture the body, nurture the mind, feed ourselves well, train, rest, learn, reflect. Surround ourselves with good influences and be careful about the things we repeatedly tell ourselves, because we're growing too. So, Karateka, if you're putting in the work, if you're training, if you're learning, if you are trying, if you are failing and getting back up, if you are still turning up, then perhaps you're doing more right than you think you are. You don't need to become somebody else. You don't need to be the best person in the room. You don't need to have somebody else's body, somebody else's achievements, somebody else's belt, somebody else's life. Be inspired by people, learn from them. Let good people show you what might be possible, but don't compare your worth to theirs, because you cannot be them, and they cannot become you. This is only one version. There's only one version of you, And perhaps your job is simply to nurture that person, to keep putting in the work, to keep learning, moving and growing. And then every now and again, stop and look back. Because maybe the person you are today is already the person that the version of you 6 months ago was hoping to become. And perhaps that's success. Not becoming somebody else, but becoming more completely yourself. You've been listening to the My Karate, My Life podcast. I'm Chrissy Howard. Until next time, keep training, keep learning, and keep growing.